Hi, I want to welcome everyone to the DeKalb Dems April 20th webinar, Beyond the Bench, Why Judicial Elections Matter. We are excited to have three candidates that are running for judicial positions that will be on the May 19th ballot. Will Wooten is running for the statewide Court of Appeals. Judges on the Court of Appeals determine whether legal cases brought to them are upheld or dismissed. I am excited to first introduce Court of Appeals candidate Will Wooten. Will?
Good evening. Thank you guys for having us. I literally just walked in the door. We just shot our first campaign ad. So very excited to be here. Very excited to help start getting the word out. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you. Thank you. Now we are excited to hear from Miracle Rankin and Jen Jordan, the candidates that are on the May 19th ballot for the state Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in Georgia and reviews decisions made in all other courts. However, the Supreme Court alone rules on questions involving the constitutionality of state laws, election contests, and petitions or requests from the Court of Appeals. First, we will hear from Miracle Rankin.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Miracle Rankin, and I'm running for the Georgia Supreme Court. I'm running because I believe that the court should be a place where every person can expect fairness, independence, and equal justice under the law. I've spent my career as a catastrophic injury attorney, where I've had the opportunity to represent individuals in some of the most difficult moments in their lives. And I've spent my practice going against corporations who have wronged individuals. What I found is that my clients and many Georgians rely upon the court system in some of their most difficult moments, and they need the courts to be steady, principled, and faithful to our Constitution. I'm running to make sure that our highest court protects the people of our state, not just the powerful, because we're all deserving of equal justice under the law. I'm very honored to be here this evening, and I would just encourage you all to make sure you have your voting plan in place and look for a miracle on your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Miracle. And now Jen Jordan is going to introduce herself. She is
Thank y'all. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. Look, we have such an exciting opportunity this year with respect to not just at the Supreme Court level with Miracle and I, but also at the Court of Appeals level with Will Wooten. You know, almost like the PSC, the positions on the court are the most important positions that a lot of people don't think about or know about in terms of when they walk into the voting booth. And I know a lot of times people think, well, that's just lawyer stuff, and you know, it doesn't really impact me that much. But what I can tell you is that there are three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and of course the judiciary. And at the end of the day, in terms of Georgia, the Supreme Court really should be the last line of defense when it comes to any government overreach, or when anyone really tries to go after some of our most basic rights. I mean, we've all heard the stories about the President of the United States trying to federalize elections, about going into the Fulton County voting office and taking away ballots. I mean, we have been in the middle of this ever since 2020. And I know that all of us feel very anxious about it, at least I do, because at the end of the day, every other right that we have flows from the ability to have free and fair elections. And right now at the U.S. Supreme Court level, we really have a court at that level that has consistently ruled to gut all of our basic rights, all of our civil rights. And I think we're really concerned that not only is it about reproductive rights and autonomy and privacy, but it extends to the basic ability to cast a vote. And, you know, as we see the the federal courts kind of back away more and more from actually protecting people in this country, it is going to be so much more significant for us to have people in the court system who really understand that the people of this state should always be first, and that should always be front of mind for anyone who is on any of the courts, whether it be the Court of Appeals or the Georgia Supreme Court. So again, I'm Jen Jordan, kind of like Miracle says, look for a miracle. Jen for justice. Just think about that when you go into the voting booth. And also I like to say rootin' for Wooten too. And just so incredibly happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have such fabulous candidates that are going to help us move Georgia forward. Now we're going to shift and Julian Wolff, who is the program director for Justice for Georgia, is going to really kind of help us understand how our judicial system works in Georgia. So Julian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thanks for having us all this evening. I'm just going to share my screen here. And I'll wait a second to make sure everyone can see this. And hopefully you should. So as Karen said, very happy to be here. I'm the program director at the Justice Project and working with our exceptional candidates here. And I'm here to kind of do some education and share with you all just how important the judicial races on the May 19th ballot are. So what's at stake? You heard our candidates say this earlier, but the federal government and the U.S. Supreme Court really doesn't protect our rights anymore. It actively attacks them. And the Georgia General Assembly has been actively rolling back rights for a long time. And really, our freedoms are going to be won or lost at the state court level. Without a federal judiciary to protect us, we have to rely on a state court system to do that work for us. Here are just a couple of things that are at stake. So in 2023, a federal court found that Georgia's congressional maps violated the Voting Rights Act and they were forced to redraw the maps. Flash forward just 3 years, and there's a court before the US Supreme Court called Calais that likely is going to strip the last vestiges of the Voting Rights Act. And so in 2026, red states are preparing to gerrymander maps even further. So if you care about fair maps, we have to have a court system that will protect fair maps. Similarly, if you care about environmental protections, I'm sure you're all aware of the disastrous coal ash cleanup that's been going on for years in Georgia. Well, if you care about environmental protections, you really have to care about what's happening at the court level, because it was the Court of Appeals actually that tried to make a change here, and then the Georgia Supreme Court rejected that case entirely. And so since that disastrous decision, ratepayers have been passed on with much higher utility rates because of these decisions. So similarly, abortion access is something that's directly connected to the state judiciary. 6 years ago, Roe versus Wade was still the law of the land across the US. And now, without the federal protections of a woman's right to choose, we're left with state systems deciding what's the law. And Georgia has one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country, with just a 6-week ban that has very limited exceptions. And so if you care about abortion access, you should care about state courts. So now I'm going to kind of get into what the state Supreme Court is and what courts are in Georgia more generally. So Karen went into this a little bit, but here's just the basics. So the Supreme Court of Georgia is the state's highest court, and it interprets the Constitution. Right now, the current court is comprised of 8 anti-rights justices, all of whom were appointed by Republican governors, and just 1 pro-rights justice. So keep that number in mind. Here's the court system more generally. So Will is running for the Court of Appeals, which you see has 15 judges statewide. Miracle and Jen are running for the state Supreme Court, which has 9 justices. And then if you kind of go all the way down, there's many, many more levels of judiciary. But of course, people don't really pay attention to these elections. They don't understand, one, that you have a vote in these, and just how important they are for everyday life. Here's what the courts don't do. They don't pass laws. They don't run elections. They're not retrying cases from scratch. And they're not acting as a political branch, even though there's often politics surrounding the court. So how do justices get on the state Supreme Court? Well, there's really 2 main pathways. I mentioned those 8 anti-rights justices were appointed by a governor. But then there's also what Miracle and Jen and Will are doing is that you can run in statewide nonpartisan elections. As I've heard Miracle say quite often, this role is not a birthright. This is something that voters have to choose, and that judges are, this is not something that just happens. We have an active say in it. And justices serve long enough to matter. So they serve 6-year terms on the state Supreme Court. And as I said earlier, 6 years ago, we were living in a very different world where there were still federal abortion protections, federal environmental protections. And so those 6-year terms can reshape life for Georgians and have long-term consequences well beyond just an election cycle. These offices are nonpartisan. So what that means is that on the May 19th ballot, these offices will appear whether somebody's voting in a Democratic primary, a Republican primary, or on the independent ballot. So justice candidates running for the state court, they run without party labels on their ballot. So nobody's going to see a D or an R next to any candidate's names. The only thing that they will see is an I to signify who the incumbents are. But this makes voter education all the more important and not less, because voters need to feel empowered to understand which candidates share their values and the positions that other candidates have taken before they're going into the voting booth. Here are some of the participation and communication challenges around these nonpartisan elections. So these races are often buried on the ballot. The May ballot is going to be incredibly long. I think it's around 4 to 5 pages, and the judicial elections are often way on the back and tucked away. And again, voters don't really understand that they have a say in these elections. Most voters also don't realize that decisions about their rights happen every single day at the state court level and not in DC at the federal Supreme Court. And again, without a party signifier, people don't really know what the values of these justices are. I've been guilty of it before, where I go into a voting booth and I see a judicial candidate and I don't know what they believe in. So I might just skip it, or I might just vote for the incumbent. But we can't let that happen. And that's why we're doing this education right now, so that we can ensure that we're communicating to folks that share our values who their candidates are. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Wisconsin. Some of you might remember this infamous photo of Elon Musk cosplaying as a Wisconsin voter. But like Georgia, Wisconsin Supreme Court elections are nonpartisan. They're held in the spring. And Wisconsin is really a model for what we can do here in Georgia. So in 2018, conservatives gained a 4-3 majority on that state Supreme Court. The progressives in the state and folks who share our values did not have their act together, and there was no plan for what they were going to do. And so everyone sat on their hands and said, well, I guess this is just the way it is. I guess we can't win these races. But in 2023, a cohort of groups got together and decided that we were going to change that. And Justice Janet, whose last name I always mispronounce, so I never try, she was elected, and that gave the court a 4-3 majority, progressive majority, and really started to build power by doing the type of organizing that the DeKalb groups are doing, but also Indivisible and all the other groups around the state. They got together and decided to make this change. Then in 2025, Elon Musk, in this photo, he spent $25 million to support the conservative candidate, making it the most expensive judicial race across the country ever. And that was just his spend. The actual amount of money that was spent in that campaign was closer to $80 million. And his $25 million, though, didn't help, because Justice Susan Crawford won by 10 points. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure you all saw that Justice Chris Taylor won by 20 points, cementing a 5-2 progressive majority. And next year, we will expand that majority to 6-1. So you can see what's possible in literally 4 years is that the Wisconsin court now protects abortion rights, now protects fair maps, protects environmental protections. And Wisconsin is truly the roadmap for what's possible here in Georgia. Again, the Georgia Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, they rule on cases every single day that impact you, your neighbors, and everyone that you care about every single day. I already mentioned a couple of the issues that the court rules on, but again, it's everything. It's fair maps, it's healthcare, it's education funding, environmental protections. And these elections, as I said, have huge stakes. And when justices serve 6-year terms, this can shift the court's balance of power for years to come. So, as a refresher, who's on the ballot in May? So Jen is running against incumbent Justice Sarah Warren. Miracle is running against incumbent Justice Charlie Bethel. And Will is running against incumbent Judge Trent Brown. So when is the election? Well, it's convenient I'm talking to you on April 20th, because today is the voter registration deadline. That means that we want all of you to go online to mvp.sos.ga.gov. You can go check your registration status, ensure all your friends are checking to make sure that they're registered. Because just 1 week from today, early voting starts. You can start going to vote in these races from April 27th to May 15th, and you can request your vote by mail ballot until May 8th. And then election day is May 19th. And this is my favorite slide because election day is May 19th, full stop. There is no runoff, and these elections do not get decided in November. People often get confused and they say to me, Julian, well, that's crazy. What do you mean they get decided in May? Don't these go to November? And no, and some might even say it's intentional. However, we have to tell everybody and to shout it from the mountaintops that this election gets fully decided on May 19th. So I know that there's gubernatorial primaries and there's state legislative primaries, but unlike all those other races, the judicial elections are getting decided May 19th with no other opportunity to start to make change in Georgia. So I'm sure you're wondering how you get involved. There's a lot of ways to get involved. And I'll make sure that Karen and you all get these resources so you can spread them after this call. But you can fill out our Supreme Court engagement form and let us know how you want to get involved, whether that's hosting a fundraiser, whether that's me coming to another group and offering this 101 training. We also have lit drops that we're doing. We have phone banks that we're doing every single day. You can pick up the phone right after this call and start making phone calls to voters. And you can also attend rallies and campaign events, or you can suggest your own way of getting involved. Another great way to get involved is social media. We have to be spreading the word about these races, and we have an incredible new tool called Demcast, where you can just log right in with your social media information, and you can click post, and it will post graphics just like the one that you see on your screen immediately to social media. We also have a C3 compliant social media toolkit that was developed by our friends at Progress Georgia. And then the Democratic Party also made their own toolkit to help spread the word. And please follow our candidates. I realize I have to update the slide, but Will's social media handles are Will Wooten, GA. So go follow Jen, Miracle, and Will and share all their content because that's really a key component to getting the word out about these races. We also have yard signs. You can request your yard sign by going to justiceforgeorgia.com, but also I know that Karen and a lot of our other incredible county parties have yard signs already and are actively distributing them. So if you'd like one, or if you'd like to deliver them across the state or in your neighborhood, we'd love to have you involved in doing that. And that's all I have for you today. So I really appreciate everyone for paying attention. And again, I can't stress enough how important these elections are. And I can't stress enough that, again, they get decided on May 19th. So now's the time to get to work. We have 29 days to go. And I really appreciate you all being here. So thank you. And thank you again, Karen, for the invitation.
Thank you, Julian. And I want to ask if you have questions for Julian, and please, if you would put them in the Q&A. I do have a couple of questions that I received from people before this session. And Julian, I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, and your research and your work, what principles do you think should guide a Georgia Supreme Court person that's elected in their interpretation of the Georgia Constitution?
That's a very good question. And I'm not an attorney, but I think these offices are nonpartisan. That's a really important factor. And that means that justices on the state Supreme Court really need to examine cases and examine how the Georgia Constitution applies here. One of my favorite quotes as it relates to state courts is from the Brennan Center, and it's something to the effect of, the U.S. Constitution is a floor, but with the state constitution, you can build a skyscraper, because the Georgia Constitution actually provides so many more protections than the US Constitution does. And so having justices on the Supreme Court and judges on the Court of Appeals who understand and who believe in protecting our most basic and fundamental rights, I think are what should be guiding a justice. So I hope that answers the question, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you. So you shared a lot of information with us this evening, but you shared, how the judges impact our lives. So what do you think currently is the biggest barrier to justices for everyday Georgians who are especially like low income, rural, or marginalized communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would encourage folks to do their own research, and there's lots of resources we can share to understand some of the rulings that this court has taken. But as I said earlier, this uh, court is comprised of 8 anti-rights justices. What I mean when I say that is that the majority of those 8 voted to uphold Georgia's 6-week abortion ban. A majority of those have voted to not hold polluters accountable for when they violate the law, when they poison our drinking water in Georgia. Um, and I think it's especially important that there are justices who believe in ensuring that the rule of law is applied fairly and evenly to everybody, and who understand that, as I said earlier, that the Constitution provides for so many protections. 6-year terms is a really long time, and we're seeing a federal government that's actively rolling back rights. Um, you know, there are so many rights, especially for women, that no longer exist or are, on the threat of non-existing. The federal government is actively trying to change how accessible it is to vote. And so, what I like to say is that these are the most important elections nobody's ever heard of. But I think people are starting to understand just how important these judicial races are to things that we care about every single day and the way that we live our lives.
Right. Eric Mintz has a question. Do other states hold their judicial elections on a day that is not the first Tuesday in November?
Yeah. So, like I said, Wisconsin is the model. Wisconsin just held their elections. It was literally like 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday in April. There are always state judicial elections. It never fails. And they happen all the time, and they're not consistent anywhere in the country. Um, I've worked in Pennsylvania where they do judicial retention elections. In North Carolina, those judicial elections are partisan. In Georgia and Wisconsin, they're nonpartisan. So, yeah, there's so many different ways that they're conducted. But again, Wisconsin is the most similar to Georgia.
One thing that you mentioned during your presentation are the number of judges that we have that have been appointed by the governor. Can you explain that a little bit more as to why
Yeah.
that's the current situation?
Well, I'm gonna let folks hypothesize why that's the current situation, why that happened. But I'll tell you that Justice Charlie Bethel, um, I believe it was I'm not going to misquote what the year was, but the day that he was reelected as state senator, that same day, a judge on the Supreme Court resigned and the governor appointed him. So it is my personal opinion that this appointment process is pretty undemocratic, because, I mean, they have to get appointed and then they have to run again. But for so long, there has been many justices who run unopposed or who run, and people just don't know about this election. And so, yes, those 8 justices who are anti-rights have been appointed by Republican governors, but then they've often just sailed right to re-election. And as I said earlier, these roles are not birthrights. These are roles that are entrusted by voters, and voters have a say and should use their voice, and vote for justices on the state Supreme Court and judges on the Court of Appeal who share their values and who share their beliefs.
Okay, and the last question that I see right now, I don't think there's another one here. So you talked about this in your presentation, but just sort of as we to reinforce this, what do you wish more Georgians really understood about how the Supreme Court works and how their decisions are made?
That's a great question. I think I wish more Georgians understood that if they want to see real change in the state, and I'll use North Carolina as an example, they want to see real change in the state, they have to care about the Supreme Court. In North Carolina, there's a Democratic governor, and respectfully, he can't do a whole lot because there is a supermajority Republican legislature who can override his veto whenever they want. And there is a court that used to be nonpartisan. They changed it to make it partisan. And there's a Republican majority partisan court that just they rubber stamp whatever the legislature does. And the only way that North Carolina will get fair maps, the only way that they will restore abortion access, the only way they will have better worker protections is by having a court that enforces the law or that strikes down laws that a legislature passes that are unconstitutional. And as it pertains to Georgia, I can't stress enough that the fights that I'm sure you're all deeply involved in to elect folks to the legislature and to the governor's mansion who support your values and who share the same beliefs as you. That progress won't be made without a court that shares those same values and who believes in protecting your rights.
Okay. And Julian, in your slides, you mentioned several opportunities for people to volunteer and how they can get quite a few items. Are you going to be able to add some of those areas in the chat, or you have it already?
Yes,
Put it in.
I'm going to put it in right now. I have a wonderful one-pager that has everybody's social media links. It has all of the social media posts that I mentioned. It has our phone banks. It has opportunities to volunteer to do lit drops. So I just dropped that in the chat, I believe. Oh, sorry. I think I sent it accidentally to actually the panelists. Here you go. There you go. Now you should all have it. If you just go to that document, it's a living document that gets updated regularly. And again, that is the kind of the one-stop shop on how to get involved.
Great, great. And for everyone who is on the call or who's viewing this by streaming, please, our philosophy is if you wake up in the morning, do something. And this is really, really, an opportunity for us to make a difference in Georgia by making sure we have some people that are pro-citizens on the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. Amy, if you could bring up the last 3 slides, there are a couple of reminders that I want to put out to the. So in DeKalb, we're pretty fortunate, actually. We have quite a few Superior Court judges and state court judges. And even though it's listed as nonpartisan in our research, these judges are really pro-democratic platform values. So the information that is on here, you can click on it, and I think it'll be in the chat, but you can have their contact information and their phone numbers. But again, most of these people are running unopposed in this election. But we really, really want to encourage anybody who looks at this webinar who is not in DeKalb to become familiar with who your current judges are, and talking to them and looking at their websites and finding out what their issues are and how they have voted is very, very helpful to us as citizens. Next slide. So this is a document that Julian sent to us, and if you click on it, Amy, it has a list of who is on our ballot. But one thing that is really important, and we can begin to sort of send this information to Julian, is if we all just research a little bit who our judges are in our counties, then again, we can pay more attention to what these individuals do. And if they're making decisions that are helpful to us, then, it's our responsibility to keep them there as citizens. But as Julian mentioned earlier, if we have judges that are rubber stamping some of the Georgia legislation that is not helpful to us as citizens, then we need to work hard to get them replaced. Thank you, Amy. The next slide. So just as a reminder, Julian went through a lot of the information that is available from the state level. In DeKalb, if you want to order materials and you click on this form, we have 3 locations that people can pick up signs, as well as cards to remind people when early voting starts, when election day is taking place, making sure that they are tied into TurboVote so they get reminders about voting. You can pick up those supplies in the north part of the DeKalb, the central Decatur area, and in South DeKalb. So we encourage everyone to, at least please get the signs, put them in your yards or businesses so that people understand the importance of voting on May 19th, as Julian has outlined. Next slide. I think. Is that it? Is that the last one?
Yeah.
I think it is. Well, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedules to join us for this webinar. It will be showing on our Facebook page. And when you touch that link, please share it with everyone in your community. The more people that we inform about the importance of these positions, the more engaged and the better that we'll have candidates that are helping us. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.